There are men in Hollywood who collect Oscars the way others collect regrets, and then there are men who collect both. Ron Howard has spent the better part of 7 decades being everything America wanted him to be. The freckle-faced boy from Mayberry, the dependable everyman of the silver screen, the director who never seemed to lose his footing no matter how turbulent the industry became around him. But in a series of recent revelations that have quietly stunned those who thought they knew his story, Ron Howard has begun peeling back the carefully maintained image to expose something far more complicated underneath. What he has revealed is not a scandal in the traditional Hollywood sense. It is something quieter and, in many ways, more devastating. The cost of a life lived entirely in service to a dream that was never entirely his own to begin with. Ron Howard was born on March 1, 1954, in Duncan, Oklahoma, into a household where the language of performance was spoken before the language of childhood. His father, Rance Howard, was an actor and his mother, Jean, had trained in the craft as well. Before Ron could form complete sentences, he had already appeared on film. By 18 months old, he had his first screen credit. Most people spend their earliest years learning the world through play, through scraped knees and sandbox negotiations. Ron Howard spent his learning how to stand under lights and hit his mark. It is a detail that sounds charming when recounted in retrospect, and devastatingly isolating when examined honestly. He has recently been more willing to examine it honestly. What strikes people most when Ron Howard speaks candidly today is the absence of bitterness. There is no anger in the way he recounts the peculiarities of his upbringing. Instead, there is something that resembles careful archaeological work, as though he is digging through layers of his own past and handing up artifacts for examination one by one. The house in Burbank where he grew up was not lavish. His parents served meatloaf and fish sticks for dinner. Scripts were piled near the table, but Rance and Jean kept their household grounded with rules designed to protect their son from the industry that was simultaneously making him famous and consuming his childhood. No hired guardians. No stage parent theatrics. But also, unavoidably, no ordinary childhood. The Andy Griffith Show defined Ron Howard's earliest public identity in ways that were both a gift and a kind of gentle trap. From October 1960 through 1968, he played Opie Taylor across 8 seasons, growing up not in a neighborhood but on a soundstage, learning the rituals of television production before he learned algebra. He has spoken recently with striking vulnerability about what he called the golden cage quality of those years. Safe? Yes. Loving? Absolutely. Andy Griffith was genuinely warm, Don Knotts was kind, and his father never left his side. But sealed. He did not have real classmates. He ate lunch with grip operators and prop masters. He did his schoolwork in a tiny room near stage 40 while the adult world of entertainment churned around him. He missed sandlot baseball. He missed bike rides with neighborhood kids. He felt these absences without fully having the language to describe them at the time, and the words have only come slowly, decades later. His parents made sacrifices that Ron Howard has only recently begun to fully articulate the weight of. Rance Howard accumulated over 140 film appearances and nearly as many television credits, not in pursuit of his own fame, but to remain close to his son's world. He drove the family to California not for glamour but for proximity to the center of a new industry. He negotiated with producers on Ron's behalf, challenged writers when the material felt inauthentic, and worked out an informal agreement with Andy Griffith himself that the father and son relationship on screen would mirror what existed between Ron and Rance in real life. It was extraordinary parenting by any measure, and it also meant that Ron Howard grew up watching his father pour himself entirely into a supporting role, not just on screen, but in life. That legacy has shaped how Ron thinks about his own choices as a father, and not always comfortably. The transition from child actor to adult filmmaker was not the smooth narrative arc that publicity materials tend to suggest. When Ron joined Happy Days in 1974, playing Richie Cunningham opposite Henry Winkler's Fonzie, he was 19 years old and already wrestling with questions about creative control that most people his age had not yet begun to consider. He was making good money, working with people he respected, and slowly suffocating inside a character who seemed allergically immune to the realities of the world outside the studio. He wrote a 3-page memo to ABC asking for Richie to grapple with Vietnam, with the draft, with the genuine anxieties of American life in the mid-1970s. The network said no. Too risky for advertisers. Ron has described what followed as a period of profound creative frustration that planted something in him, a need not just to perform other people's visions, but to build his own. What he built was remarkable by any measure. Grand Theft Auto in 1977, co-written with his father on a budget of just over $600,000, returned $15 million at the box office. Night Shift introduced Michael Keaton to mainstream audiences. Splash made Tom Hanks a star. Apollo 13 grossed $355 million worldwide and earned 9 Academy Award nominations. A Beautiful Mind won him the Oscar for Best Director on March 24, 2002, a night that represented the culmination of a career that had begun before he could read. By any external measure, Ron Howard had arrived at exactly the destination a life like his was supposed to reach. But what Ron Howard has been revealing recently, with increasing candor, is that arrival and peace are not the same thing. The Oscar did not quiet the questions he carried. The success did not undo the absences. And the professional discipline that made him one of Hollywood's most reliable filmmakers came at costs he is only now fully willing to name. The story of his brother Clint is perhaps the most painful chapter Ron Howard has opened recently. Clint Howard, who also entered the entertainment industry as a child, found that the industry did not treat him with the same continuity of opportunity that it offered Ron. By the 1980s, Clint had fallen into cocaine and alcohol addiction. By 1990, according to accounts both brothers have given in their 2021 memoir, Clint was at rock bottom. Ron has described the conversation he had with his brother as one of the hardest of his life. He told Clint plainly, "Go to rehab, or lose the relationship." It was not an ultimatum born of cruelty. It was born of the particular desperation that comes from watching someone you love disintegrate. Clint chose recovery. He chose life. But Ron has admitted, with the kind of honesty that costs something to speak aloud, that he felt guilty. His own rise had cast a shadow that Clint had to live inside. That shadow was not intentional. But it was real. The professional decisions that Ron Howard now revisits with the most evident pain are the ones that intersected with fatherhood. He married his high school sweetheart, Nancy Morgan, on June 7, 1975. They were both 21 years old. They established a rule from the beginning: no work talk at dinner. That rule held for 50 years. But rules about dinner conversation cannot cover the gaps left by absence, and Ron Howard has been honest about the gaps. In 1991, his daughter Jocelyn was born. 1 year later, he left for 6 months to film Far and Away in Ireland. It was the longest separation from his family he had ever undertaken. When he returned, Jocelyn had changed in the irreversible way that infants change: rapidly, completely, without waiting. His daughter Bryce barely recognized him. Nancy had been parenting alone through all of it. He has said that the moment of homecoming shook something loose in him that has never entirely settled back into place. He promised himself he would not let it happen again. He kept that promise imperfectly. In 2005, reshoots for Cinderella Man pulled him away again. More of Bryce's life went past while he was somewhere else. The accumulation of these absences is something Ron Howard has begun to name publicly in a way that is clearly still uncomfortable for him. At the celebration of his 50th wedding anniversary with Nancy in 2025, he donated a bench to the high school where they first met and made what has been described as a quiet confession. He still regretted missing so much. Nancy nodded. The dinner rule still stood. But she wished, he has acknowledged, that he had seen the cost earlier. Not in retrospect. Earlier. His relationship with Bryce Dallas Howard has become one of the most discussed aspects of his recent confessions. He directed her school play when she was 5 years old. He meant it as love. He has since come to understand it as pressure, as the unconscious imposition of a path before she had chosen one for herself. He has said he apologized to her. She forgave him. She went on to study at NYU's Tisch School of the Arts, launched her own career with The Village in 2004, and has since earned substantial recognition and compensation for her work in major studio productions. But the apology and the forgiveness do not erase what Ron has described as the discomfort of recognizing that even well-intentioned influence can become its own form of burden. The collapse that occurred during the production of Apollo 13 has taken on new resonance in light of everything Ron Howard has been sharing. He worked 18-hour days for 90 consecutive days on that film. He attended NASA briefings, reviewed every frame of footage, conducted night rehearsals, and refused to approximate anything that could be made accurate. On the 90th day, his body gave out. Dehydration. Hypertension. He collapsed on set. Production stopped for 36 hours. He has spoken about this recently not as a badge of dedication but as a warning sign he refused to read at the time, a sign that his relationship with work had crossed from passion into something that was actively harming him. The crew made shirts that read Mission Control when he returned. The gesture was affectionate. The underlying story was darker. The professional stumbles have also been part of what Ron Howard is now telling more openly. EDTV in 1999 cost $80 million and earned $50 million. He had turned down Castaway to make it. It came out weeks after The Truman Show, a film that covered similar territory with more precision. The losses were real, $30 million in a single project. He learned from it, moved forward, and rarely revisited the episode publicly until recently. Solo, a Star Wars story, which he took over mid-production in 2018 after the original directors were removed, required him to reshoot 70% of the film. It still underperformed at the box office. Ron has acknowledged that Solo came closer to ending his directing career than anything else. He has said publicly that he was close to stepping away entirely. What pulled him back, in his own account, was Bryce. His daughter, the one he had pushed into a school play at 5 and apologized to years later, became the person who convinced him to keep going. Eden, his 2025 survival thriller set in the 1930s Galapagos Islands, represents a particular kind of courage from a filmmaker who had every reason to retreat to safer territory. He had first encountered the story 15 years earlier and had been drawn to it immediately, reportedly beginning to outline ideas the same night he heard it. The film opened to modest numbers, a challenging result for a project he had carried for so long.